Welcome to Ordinary to Badass, episode number 372. In this episode, you're going to hear from Leslie Draffin. Now, Leslie, she is a psychedelic sensuality and feminine embodiment coach. She's a psychedelics, sensuality, and feminine embodiment coach. And she helps women heal trauma when it didn't work in therapy. And she helps women heal trauma after therapy fails. So, in this episode, you're going to hear so many good things. I'm so excited for this episode. One of the things you're going to hear about is using psilocybin for managing your PMS. And also, we talk a lot about overcoming trauma, PTSD, secondary trauma, burnout, all the things. And then we talk about microdosing, how you can use microdosing for resilience and also how Leslie used it to stop drinking alcohol. So microdosing is just using small amounts, and she coaches on how to use small amounts of psilocybin. So this episode is so good. She also talks about overcoming shame and really embracing self-love. Stay tuned because I know that you're going to love this episode. But before we get there, But before we get there, I just got to tell you, or I'm just going to share with you what's been going on with me. And there has been so much going on, lots of changes, and I've not been pumping out content like I would like. You haven't seen as many podcast episodes as I would like for you to see. But you know what? Just like you sometimes, I struggle. Well, not sometimes I struggle. We all struggle, right? We're human. And so just like you, so I've been struggling to get stuff out, but I've still been working on the back end, right? So a couple things super excited about is the proof of my badassery journal, and I cannot wait for you to get your hands on it. I've been working behind the scenes on it. Actually, it started back in December when we did the 12 days of badassery, and I really got excited, really got pumped, and then I ordered copies of it, and guess what? It came back to me blank. Like the front and the back page were cool, were how I wanted it, but all the inner pages of the journal, they weren't there. And so that kind of deflated my tires, so to speak, took out some of my energy. But I am back. I saw something that like recaptured my energy on it or re got me re-excited. And I was like, okay, this is too good. I can't not put this out into the world. And so proof of my badassery journal is coming your way, and it is so good. If you don't think that you're a badass, nope, this is going to prove it to you because there's questions and prompts to guide you along the way. And so I just know that this is going to be the thing that helps each and every one of you really claim your badassery. And then you can walk into rooms and feel 10 times more confident. It is just so good. And I can't wait for you to get your hands on it and start filling it out because this is something you can keep forever. It's something you can constantly go back to when you're doubting yourself and you're doubting your greatness and your abilities, and you don't realize that all of these hard things that you've overcome, those can get you to where you want to go. And so this journal is going to help you with that. It's definitely going to boost your confidence. It's definitely going to make you saying, yeah, I'm a badass, and owning it, claiming that shit. So if you can't tell, I'm freaking pumped because I know what a game changer this is going to be for you. Soon, I will have an assessment up for you so you can take an assessment and really realize the badass that you are. If you're not ready to buy the journal or really commit to that, or you just want a taste of it to see if you're interested in the journal, this assessment is really going to help you dig in and nail down different ways in your life that you're a badass, and it will also give you prompts. So I'm excited for things to come. But then here's the other thing. Here's the backside of it. Regardless if you buy the journal, regardless if you check out the assessment, here's the cool thing. It's like sometimes we give up. Sometimes we throw in the towel. We stop working on something. But then it's okay to pick it back up and go again. Kind of like I did with the journal, right? It's like, yeah, it sucks. It would be ideal if I had it out in December or January, like riding the wave when it felt really good at first. But you know what? Who cares? It doesn't make you any less of a badass if it took you some time to get there. If it took you 6 extra months, an extra year. But you know what? You were resilient enough to go back and do the thing. You were resilient enough to like, I'm going to finish this. I started it. I am going to finish it. So it's hard to realize that in the moment, and it's so easy to like beat ourselves up for not getting the thing done quickly or as we had originally planned. But you know what? If you pick it back up and you go for it, who cares? Just get it done, right? You are a badass. And let's start just like learning to love ourselves and accept the pace that we're going because it is. That's reality of it, right? And so beating ourselves up over not getting something done sooner, what is that going to do for you? So I'm just reminding myself to give yourself grace. And as these things come up, okay, take it and run with it as soon as you can. Take it and run with it. Who cares if you had to put pause for a minute and then you pick it back up and go? I'm using my hands a lot today. But if you pick it back up and go, that's okay. That's just as badass, maybe even more because you had the balls to pick it up and go again, right? Okay. With that, let's get to the show.
Be confident, be bold, be authentic, but don't forget to take action. This is Ordinary to Badass, where our stories empower women to step into the spotlight of their own lives and pursue what they're truly passionate about. It's time to step into the arena and become more than just extraordinary. It's time to become a badass with your host, Marie Sonneman.
Welcome to Ordinary to Badass. Whether you're ordinary or badass, I'm so glad you're here. Today's guest is Leslie Draffin. Leslie, thank you so much for being here. Excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Marie. Thank you so much for having me.
So before we go any further, I've got to ask you, do you consider yourself ordinary or badass?
Definitely badass for many different reasons, but certainly on the badass end of things.
I love it when people just own it. Have you always felt like a badass?
I think there are times in my life when I've certainly ebbed and flowed in and out of my badassery, but my parents did a really great job from a young age of helping me feel special. I was adopted, and that was like one of the ways that they really like implemented that one history, that lineage of mine, but also like instilling in me this idea that like I could do anything I wanted and could achieve anything I wanted. So I know I had a lot of confidence as a kid. It definitely like fell a bit by the wayside in the teen years, as I think a lot of us experience. And then through my 20s and 30s, yeah, it's ebbed and flowed depending on where my mental health was.
Nice. So do you think it was like one thing that made you feel like a badass, or a series of things, or just like you said, was it your childhood upbringing?
That's so fascinating. That's a good question. I think I've kind of always had this attitude where, at least on the outside looking in, like, so the way people perceive me is that I'm incredibly confident. I don't give a fuck. Like I'm going to do and achieve and go for it. That really came into play when I was in my younger years as, being on the stage. I was, in theater, in choir. And then I went on to be a TV news anchor, which definitely requires confidence and some badassery. But I think for me, it was a combination of my childhood and then some really important steps I took in my mid 30s to like get my confidence and my badassery back when, that outward facade of confidence started to crumble. Because, while I say folks perceived me to be incredibly confident my whole life, internally, it wasn't always that way. And I would like put this face out for the public to see, while internally I was just like, felt like shit, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, kind of like we see stuff on social media or we see stuff out in the public just with everyday people, and we just might see the glossed over version, but we don't see like the hard work or the struggle that goes on behind the scenes.
100%. And I think that was certainly the role I was playing. For the longest time, really felt like my identity was in being a perfectionist and overachiever and ambitious woman and kid. And that really parlayed very well into the career that I chose for myself. But the longer I was in TV news, the more I realized that that was just a role I was playing, another role. And internally, and the person I really was very different from like you said, that glossy version we present to those outside of ourselves.
Okay, I can't wait to dig in, and I'm sure we'll hear about some of those steps that made you feel like a badass along the way in your bio and throughout the interview. So, if you don't mind, will you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I am the adopted daughter of a Southern preacher. I grew up in the deep South of the United States and was a very outgoing kid. I think I was very overachieving and knew I really wanted to tell stories and talk to people. And so the natural progression of that was to go into journalism. And so from the age of 21, 22 until 36, I was in the TV news industry. So I rose the ranks pretty quickly, became evening news anchor and managing editor of my most recent news station. And then in the midst of that, like outward career success, where people would tune in on the news, and I'm sure they're like, what a badass. Internally, I was big time struggling. I suffered from an eating disorder from the age of 15 to 35. I was diagnosed with herpes at 18 and really struggled with shame around that, especially due to my upbringing being extremely religious. I had a messy AF divorce in my 20s that like knocked me on my ass and threw me even deeper into alcohol abuse. And then finally in my 30s, found the tools that really helped me, one, regain, I think, some of that outward confidence, but finally feel internally like I was who I'm actually meant here to be, and find a way to exude, have that outward confidence, that outward facade, like finally integrate within myself. So the tools that I really credit with my shifts are things like meditation, microdosing psychedelics, somatic embodiment and trauma recovery work, lots of therapy. And I ultimately left TV news in 2022 because I was suffering so badly with mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and PTSD that I had gained from being the anchor there during the pandemic while everyone else worked from home. Covering school shooting after school shooting after school shooting, and really not understanding how to self-resource so that the shit that I saw on TV every day and the even more terrible things I saw that we could never air didn't come back home with me. And so I shifted into the world of coaching, and now I help women sort of uncover ways to heal their trauma holistically through plant and earth medicines and somatic resourcing.
What I loved is that you shared the hard things you went through and you shared some of the kind of behind the scenes. I often have to ask guests, like, take us behind the scenes of like some of the hard struggles you've been through, because it's not all gumdrops and lollipops. So I appreciate you just being upfront and sharing that stuff, just because like that's relatable. That's
Yeah.
stuff we all go through, and sometimes it's just not talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I said, for so long, my entire 20s were just about numbing the fuck out by starving myself, by drinking my calories in the form of wine, and in the end of that decade, some pretty questionable sexual choices. Um, and so now at 30, almost 38, I really have made it my mission to be authentic as fuck and realized that so much of the shame that I held on to for so long had to do with the fact that I had put those things into a closet and they grew into this monster. But when you let the monster out, it's not a monster anymore. It's like a mouse. So if you just shine the light on the things, you just they lose their power. And so that's really why I say it all.
And why do you think that is that they lose their power when you talk about it or when you shine a light on it?
I think for a lot of folks, especially myself, the fear around what others were going to think was what created so much shame. My herpes diagnosis was the most shameful thing that could have happened to me, right? I was raised extremely religious. If you have sex before marriage, something bad will happen to you. 4 weeks after I lost my virginity, something bad did happen to me. So it was like this verification of the like indoctrination that I had heard for all of those years coming true. And so I just knew I could not tell anyone like um, who was going to love me if I had this. Like I went through so much struggle because of that, like worrying that I was not going to be loved, that I was not worthy. And so a core wound I had had from infancy based on my adoption about being unworthy, being unloved, that I had absorbed into my subconscious was then just like made enforced by that herpes diagnosis. And so for me, I really only started talking openly about herpes this year on my social media channels because I realized like, first of all, that's like doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm lovable for a million different reasons, and that's just one facet of myself. I'm in an incredibly loving and strong relationship that certainly helped me feel confident enough to share about that. But as far as why I think shame makes us why we put shame in the closet and it just grows into this beast, it is again because of the fear that we'll get ostracized, that we won't be loved, that we won't be accepted by the tribe, right? And that's totally like within our ingrained self. That's nervous system shit right there. And then for me, I just realized that if I can self-source that safety internally without having to rely on others, I'll be okay. And certainly I've had, like I said, an amazing husband, amazing friends and family who do support my choices to speak openly about this because they also see how much work I've done to get back into a safe place, so that when the haters come, when the exes come through pissed off that we're talking about this online, I can just go back into my own resilience and understand that I'm okay.
Yeah, and I imagine that that has got to be kind of freeing, especially coming from like the news world. Yes, I don't know about that, but I would think you'd have to be a little bit buttoned up. So to be able to say like what you really want to be able to say, it must
Oh my
feel.
God. Oh my goddess, yes. So I started my own podcast in 2021 because I knew I wanted to be able to speak my truth and cuss and talk about whatever I wanted to. And so that really helped while I was still in TV to have an outlet that was allowing me to be more authentic. But while I had to do a ton of work around releasing the identity of a news anchor and a journalist and a highly successful six-figure earner, and when I decided to leave in 2022, one of the things that did come in so quickly was like that breath of fresh air and that freedom to be like, fuck it, I can say whatever I want. I cannot get fired. I'm my own boss. And what's been so fascinating is that the viewers who still follow me, because I still live in the same town where I was an anchor before I left, they're here for it. The majority of them are really fucking here for all the wild shit that we talk about now. And I think you're right. Like people like to see that.
Yeah, for sure. And then like I don't know, I feel like at a certain level people can sense it. Like when you're just it's not even that you're not being authentic, but when you want to talk the way you want to talk, you know?
Mhm.
I just feel like, or maybe it's something just emanates from us when there's something else that we'd rather be talking about.
Yeah, I think so too. And I certainly look back at like the different stations I worked at and the different milestones I was hitting throughout my 15-year career in TV. And there were times when it was like, God, who was she? Like I was in I used to be an anchor in Oklahoma City. That's when I got divorced. That was when the peak of my eating disorders were there, and my alcohol abuse and dating some terrible people. And so I look at her and she is a shell, like a shell of herself. But I always say, like, I've been a million different people since I left TV in 22. The billions that I've been since like I was born into this planet, just all those iterations of myself, like, yeah, it's kind of wild.
Yeah. And I don't know that we give ourselves permission enough though to just be who we want to be or to like experiment, like, oh, what does this feel like? Or,
Yeah.
you know, is this how I want to behave? Or is this how I want to, I don't know, like just experiment and see what feels comfortable to us or what feels legit to us.
No, I don't think that the majority of us do give ourselves that, like that radical, authentic self-love, and self-acceptance, right? For me, self-love was such a tricky trigger word for so long, but acceptance was like, okay, I got that. Like I can accept myself and accept the things that are truly authentically me. But no, I don't think a lot of people do. I think that collectively, maybe we are seeing some things shift, but I also think that because of the huge prevalence of social media and this like whole idea that you share only the pretty parts, for so many folks, I worry that that keeps them out of badassery because they don't give themselves the space to like let even their messy shit come through. Because I think the mess isn't like the message is in your mess.
Yeah.
That's certainly my life experience, right? Like if I could go back and tell 18-year-old Leslie who had just gotten that herpes diagnosis that in like 20 years you would be telling people about it and helping women heal, and that was like, yeah, the messiest thing that could have happened to you, and in the end it's going to be like your life mission. First of all, I would never have believed myself, but like how powerful if I had to have that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes we think like the worst things that happen to us are just like so shameful, so embarrassing. Like I was $106,000 in debt and I ended up paying that off in 2 years. But if you had asked me when I was $106,000 in debt, I would have been like mortified, embarrassed. I wouldn't want to tell anybody. And then it's like after, like, yeah, it's a cool story to tell, or like it's something that I overcame, you know? But it's funny because when we're in the moment, it's just like all of the shame, all of the embarrassment and the fear just like seeps in.
Yeah. And I think there's just something so interesting too about the key areas of life where we feel shame. Money, huge. Sex, huge. And when we look at our society, this patriarchal capitalistic society, like of course those things that we are told we need to hold up on this platter, like be moral, don't be in debt, like save money wisely, like earn this, you need to make this to be worthy. Of course those things are going to fill us with shame if we don't quote unquote live up to what our fucked up status quo is.
Yeah, yeah. So when you left your job, can you walk us through that? What did that feel like? What was the inspiration or the push to get out of it? And then also,
Mm.
was there any fear telling your family and your friends? And can you walk us through that?
Oh God, it felt like death, like literal death. It was such a death card moment, like tower moment. I had been working with the goddess Kali that summer beforehand. Like, why? Because she's the goddess of destruction. Like, she was going to tear all the things down, just like Mother Nature, so that new life can spring forth. So I had been suffering big time with burnout without knowing what that even was for most of 21. My husband said, you know, so throughout the pandemic, I was that person that like, and this is how I am in a crisis in general. If some shit goes down, you want me on your fucking team because I will have all the plans in place. I will handle it. I won't be crying. I will be like, bitch has got her shit together. That's probably why I was so good at my job. And so and now I know that's such a trauma response, right? So I was in that hyper aroused state of fight for all of 2020, the pandemic, and most of 2021. And about like fall of 21, my husband, in retrospect, like looking back, he was like, yeah, I feel like that's when the light left your eyes. Like you would just like come home, go to work, like live to work, and you just looked like you hated life. And so in early 22, I got sick. I thought I had COVID, never tested positive, and stayed sick for about 3 months. It was like a respiratory thing, very fascinating, that was like affecting my throat. Because someone needed to speak their truth. Energetically, we know that's how that happens. So I had been talking with a friend of mine who had taken FMLA, so family medical leave for mental health. You know, I was never told that was even an option in TV. Like I definitely would have needed that when I got divorced in my late 20s, but no one ever mentioned that that was like a thing you could do if you were suffering. In my perspective, it was like, just do that if you have a baby, period. Well, I was never going to have a baby. So I was like, why do I have this if I'm never going to give birth? So I started to talked to my therapist and a psychiatrist and my family medical doctor about like, how do we get this ball rolling? What do I have to do? But I was still in the bargaining mode, right? I was like, well, I know I really need to take this break, but like, oh, if I take this time off, like my co-anchor can't go on vacation with his family. So like, I'll just keep putting it off. I'll do it after the summer. Well, we had this terrible school shooting really close to where I live, and like 19 elementary school children were murdered. It was horrific. And I had already had a moment earlier in 2022 where I was doing a story and it was really sad. It was a 9-year-old who'd committed suicide. And I cried on the air. First time in however many years I was on TV. And it wasn't like a boo-hoo cry, but it was like a I'm choked up. So skip to the summer of 22, we had that terrible school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And I'm like the only anchor on the desk because we were low staffed that week. I'm reading about like what they wanted to be when they grew up, like their favorite colors. And I just lose it. Like I am broken. I'm like doing everything I can to get to the commercial break. And when I get to the commercial, my producer is in my ear. She's like, are you okay? I was like, no, I'm not fucking okay. I'm broken. Like I cannot. So I talked to my boss, decided to take that leave and just never went back because I realized that what was happening for me, one, this dream job that I had wanted since I was in 5th grade was now a nightmare. I did not see a way to continue doing it safely for my mental health. I didn't want to go back on medications that I had been on in my late 20s. And fortunately, I had already been microdosing psilocybin, so psychedelic mushrooms, since earlier that year with a coach. And that did really help me see where in my life things were not aligned and TV was not aligned anymore. So my parents were not surprised. Nobody was surprised. I think like everybody was really shitting on the media at that point. So they're like, of course, Leslie wants to get out because it's trash. And like, I can say that as someone who's internally, it's y'all don't want to know how the sausage gets made because it's nasty. What you see on TV is worse enough, like, ugh, behind the scenes. So they were not surprised. Everyone was super supportive. I was incredibly worried about the fact that I was the breadwinner, right? I was making 6 figures. I had the insurance. My husband had started his own business. It's a food truck. We own a food truck about a year before I left, but he was like, no, baby, like I got it. We're going to be fine. I was blessed to have been able to save some money. So we were okay in that regard. But I think for me, the thing that's like, I never thought I would grieve it like I did. Then we lost 2 of our dogs back to back. So it was even more grief. So a lot of that. And then I had to really grapple with like, who am I? If I'm not this, who the fuck am I? Because this is all I've ever known that I am. So I really had to do a lot of internal work, thankfully working with the medicine, mushrooms as the medicine is the way I'm speaking about that, working with my mindfulness, mindset, and really understanding that so much of what I had been internalizing and where my PTSD was really living in my body needed to move out somatically. I couldn't keep talking about my trauma. I'm a highly intelligent, self-aware woman, and talk therapy stopped working for me because talking about your trauma doesn't heal your trauma. And I had to figure out a way to do that for myself. And that was like my dark night of the soul all rolled into one. It was terrible. It was great. I'm over, like, we're out of it now. It felt like I said, it felt like death. But
Yeah.
rebirth happened after. Yeah.
Yeah. So I work in law enforcement. So I get it. You hear terrible things, and there's
Yeah.
something called secondary trauma where you're
Yes.
absorbing the trauma of the stuff you're, like in your case, reporting on.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I've seen it so many times. It's like people try to hold it in and be put together, and you do this over and over again until one day you just can't anymore. And in that sense, it's like I feel like something's got to change, so that people can actually feel their emotions, even if it's like,
Mhm.
even if you can't do it on screen per se, but you like it's more of a culture thing, where people can talk about it, or I don't know, because I feel like people burn out.
100%. 100%. That was me. And I love that you brought up the secondary trauma because I did not understand what that even was. When my psychiatrist is like, you have PTSD, like the fuck, like nothing bad's really ever happened to me. Well, then I look back at my birth trauma, herpes as a trauma, the fact that I'd seen like horrific things for so long. And just like having to go talk to someone on their very worst day and report on the worst of humanity year after year after year, the phone calls I would take from the senior citizens who were terrified during the pandemic and were alone while I was alone working because everyone else got to work from home, like all of that was secondary trauma. And I had no idea that that was even a thing that could happen. And so that was surprising to me to learn that that was something that could deeply impact you. And you're right. Like I didn't have any tools to process the stuff after I would go off air. I would just drink wine. And so that's not a way to process. That is the worst way. It doesn't process anything. It just makes you numb. And so for me, like I said before, I'm that person that works so well in like crunch time and in panic mode. Like that's where I thrive. And for me, where then I go is into this state of like total collapse. And that was really where I lived for the late 2022 is in a state of collapse.
So, can you talk about how you rebuilt and what has helped you?
Yeah, for sure. So I started understanding this whole idea of resiliency. And in the trauma recovery world, there are a bunch of different ways that you can like explain it. But for me, the way I believe resiliency to be is this idea of being able to go from feeling totally peaceful, calm, and safe into a state of activation or even a state of numbing, but then getting yourself back to safety versus living either in the fight or flight or living in that fawn freeze. And so for me, I had no idea, one, that that was what I was doing with alcohol, with scrolling social media, with eating or starving myself, that control. And so when I started to study somatic trauma specifically, and also psychedelic medicine, I realized that, okay, becoming more resilient for me was going to be the key because you're going to always be in these different states. Like life is not a state of always living in balance and peace. You have to be able to face what's going to come up for you and get yourself back into it. The animals outside have very little problem getting back into a state of safety. We as humans in a modern world, like we're always in fight or flight pretty much thanks to social media. So for me, what resiliency really looked like and crafting more resiliency, one started with microdosing psilocybin, because the way that that works in the brain is to help create new neural pathways and to turn off certain parts of the brain called the default mode network, which is really responsible for like our status quo, like the way we always operate, our patterns. So if my pattern was to like see something triggering, go drink wine because I need to like stuff those feelings down, microdosing helped me to find new ways to work around that. So things like mindfulness really became easier. I'd already thankfully been meditating since 2019. I had a good meditation practice, but microdosing really elevated that because I was able to, and it's strange if you've never experienced psychedelic medicine, but like I was able to look at what was happening in my life almost from above and connect the dots to see where my triggers were, to see how I could respond to things versus react. And so working through this microdosing protocol for me that was months long really helped me to start creating those safety moments in myself. The other thing that I have found to be incredibly helpful is cold plunge or ice baths. And those are really popular right now. And there's a shitload of science around it, and I'm not going to bore you with it. But basically, for me, the reason I think that they work so well for me is because when you get in that water and you're like, I hate this, and you sit there for 2 or 3 minutes, afterwards, one, your dopamine is like through the roof. But two, you know, you can face hard things. Your body goes into that state of like activation, that fight or flight. I want to get out of this tub. And then afterwards, when you're able to calm yourself back down, I think that that has helped me really develop internal resilience to like how my body sensations get that. Like I'm not having to tell my body from my mind into my body just gets it. We're in cold, we get out, we're back to safety. And then the other thing that I have really relied on heavily is breath work. So not so much anything even that serious, right? Just inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, maybe to a count of 4 or a count of 8. And understanding that the breath for me is something that immediately grounds me. I'm blessed to not have any more respiratory issues after that 3-month sickness in 2022. Like that was hard to try to do breath work then. Maybe when seasonal allergies hit in Texas, I'll have to switch, but it's like an internal anchor that really helps me come back into safety. If somebody pulled out in front of me in traffic, if I like am babysitting my niece and I see her about to tumble off the couch and I have to like do a running catch, like getting back into that. So those are for me, I've been able to build that resiliency.
So can you explain a little bit about microdosing? I'll be
Sure.
honest, I'm really not versed in that, so I don't quite know like what is the difference if you're microdosing psilocybin versus like marijuana? What is the difference? And I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Right. So microdosing in and of itself just means taking a tiny bit of a substance. You can microdose, like you said, cannabis. You can microdose mushrooms. You can microdose coffee or caffeine. You can microdose cacao. There are many things that you can microdose. The way that I do it and the way I work with clients is most often around psilocybin or a psychedelic medicine. Some folks say that you can microdose like LSD and MDMA. There's also some like other talk in the psychedelic world about whether or not that's true. I stick mostly with psilocybin, but it means that you're taking so little, you're not hallucinating, you're not impaired, you're able to do everything that you would normally need to do. I anchored the TV news after microdosing. You can drive, you can parent, and that's what makes it so wonderful. Whereas doing something at a high dose, these full dose trips, like when you hear about people tripping, when you think about the 60s, people like doing quote unquote, like the ego death trips or anything like that, if you've heard about those, that's taking a higher level of this medicine that does impair your judgment, right? Like you're seeing things, you're hearing things, you're usually like laying down, not able to walk for a little bit of time. So when you talk about logistically, the amount of dosage, that's probably like that'll help people to understand too. A full dose trip journey, like you're going on a journey, is usually 3 grams to 5, even 7. I've heard of people taking 10 grams or more. And like on those trips, like you're going away for a while into your mind. A microdose is generally 0.1 gram to up to 0.5. So a tiny little amount. There is a term that gets thrown around a lot in the psychedelic community called subperceptual, meaning it's so small you barely even perceive it. I don't necessarily say it that way. I say non-intoxicating because I believe you can feel much more present. So you do feel something, but that's generally the how of microdosing. And you would microdose a couple days a week, not every single day, and usually stick with a program for a few months, especially as a beginner, because what happens is this medicine compounds over time. And as you stick with it, that's how you really begin to see those new neural pathways. You begin to experience new habits, new beliefs. You're able to like open the door to your subconscious in a really gentle way versus those full dose journeys, which are not that gentle, and kind of shine the light on those little monsters in the closet, like we talked about earlier. And for me, what was really, I think, probably long term, the best thing about microdosing is that it helped me get sober. I've been sober for over a year because microdosing finally helped me see why I was drinking, the emotions I was trying to cover with my drinking, what drinking was really doing to me, which was increasing my anxiety and effing up my sleep, and then finally helped me to again, ground into my own inner resilience. So I didn't feel like I needed to reach for alcohol whenever something bad happened.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I think most people don't realize that alcohol actually increases your anxiety. Like they do it to relieve anxiety, but it actually has the opposite effect.
100%. And the other thing I never realized until I read this amazing book by Ruby Warrington called Sober Curious is people think alcohol helps you sleep. Alcohol will possibly help you fall asleep, but it will not help you stay asleep. And so in the midst of the pandemic, when I was drinking probably, well, not more than I ever drank. I was drinking way more in my 20s, but I was drinking a lot in 2020. And I would always wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Now I'm also a witch, so it's like the witching hour. So maybe that's why I was waking up. But really, it was because I had a couple of glasses of wine when I got off of the news at 10 p.m. And then I would fall asleep and wake up. And I kept doing that. My sleep was so interrupted. And sometimes I wouldn't be able to fall back asleep for an hour because then I'm worried about, oh shit, I'm not sleeping. Oh my God, the day's going to be terrible tomorrow. Oh my, can you believe what was happening on the news last night? Wow, I'm so anxious. It's like that hamster wheel that you can't get off. And so alcohol, yeah, I think being free of alcohol is probably one of the top 3 gifts microdosing gave me.
Nice. So, okay, you said you're also a witch. What do you mean by that? Of course, I wait till you take a drink to ask, but
Right? Can you not tell? So for me, being a witch means being a woman in total control of herself. It means that I do not subscribe to like religious doctrine anymore, despite how I was raised. I really believe that I believe in God, and I believe that she created the universe in her image because the goddess is the ultimate creatrix. Um, I've had some amazing experiences with that entity in full dose medicine, like mushroom journeys. But for me, it's really about living in tune with the natural cycles of the world, of the planet, living in tune with my natural cycles as a woman, with my menstrual cycle, with the moon cycle. And I'm not someone who does a lot of spells, but I certainly have in the past done, maybe a bit of candle work, sex magic, blood rituals with my bleed. But yeah, that's what I mean by being a witch. It's something that for me makes me feel really powerful as a woman and helps me feel really connected to the world and to, yeah, just the universe.
thank you for explaining that. Okay, I want to pop back really quick to microdosing. What is something that your clients come to you with? Maybe it's the most common thing they come to you with, or what would lead somebody to start microdosing?
There are so many reasons folks come to microdosing. One that I've found really recently is that they're in talk therapy and it's just not working. Right. So they've identified some core reasons why they have these blocks, but no matter how much they talk about their trauma, like it's just not moving through their body. They're not able to move through that block into a state of thriving. And so I'll work with them to really use somatic resourcing or embodiment practices through either meditation or breath work or grounding or cold plunges or walks. There's so many different somatic resources they can choose from, but that sort of helps to move through the things that might be coming up. Because what happens in a microdosing session with me or coaching session is they usually will ingest their medicine, meet with me in session. We may do a bit of visualizing in meditation form, maybe do a bit of breath work, movement. And then it's also a lot like a counseling session, right? Like, how is your week? What's coming up for you now? The other thing that I have helped folks work with a lot is grief. That's one thing that microdosing helped me work through. I had to grieve the loss of that job and that identity. I had to grieve the loss of those little kids that I didn't even know. I had to grieve the loss of my 2 dogs who had passed away that summer. And so I had a really amazing client who I wrapped up 6 months of work with. Actually, I think we did 4 months of work, but we worked with each other last year and her dad had died. And I'm telling you, we were visioning journeying. She had ingested her medicine, a little dose. And as I was guiding her, like her dad came to her in the meditation and was like helping guide her and helping her feel worthy because she had had this core wound that she uncovered from infancy about not feeling loved and not feeling worthy. And those things were so much more heightened when her father passed away. And so it was really healing for her to really feel his energy and presence and that message, I believe, guided by the medicine to her during that type of a session. But I've also helped people with sex. Period pain has been greatly decreased in every single one of my clients who still bleeds because I help them microdose in tune with their cycle. I created a cyclical based microdosing approach, which is the only one out there, to really help tackle PMS, PMDD, and cramps. So those are some of the main things that folks come to me for.
What is the benefit of doing it with your cycle?
So I think that as a woman, if we can live in tune with our cycle, everything gets better. right? Our world is set up for male hormones. It is not set up for female hormones. And so if you're not that familiar with how your cycle works, a lot of people just think your cycle are the days that you bleed, but you're always somewhere in your menstrual cycle. And throughout the month, your energy goes up, it goes down, your mood goes up and down. I know y'all know that. Your hunger goes up and down. I know you know that too. That's why you're so ravenous right before your bleed. And so when you start to understand the language of your womb, the language of your body, you can start to understand how to navigate your life and situate your life so that things get easier. So when you incorporate a microdosing protocol that is cycle aligned, I really believe it can help you live even more in tune with your cycle and tackle cyclical challenges. So the way that my method works, you split your cycle in half. The first half are usually the 2 weeks after your period. The second half are the weeks right before your period. In the first half, you would sit with medicine 1 day on, 2 days off, repeat, repeat. And then right before your bleed, generally about 10 to 12 days before you bleed, you would add more medicine into your life. So 3 days of medicine, 2 days without, and repeat. What that does is it allows the psilocybin which we know has an anti-inflammatory property, to be more present in your body in the time of your cycle, which often creates more mood swings, pain, things like anxiety and depression. I've had a couple of clients with PMDD, which is basically PMS on crack, see pretty great shifts in their ability to manage their symptoms thanks to the addition of psilocybin. And so that's sort of why it's interesting, right? I certainly work with folks who don't use my cyclical plan because it does require you to be pretty in tune with your cycle and to want to get in tune with your cycle. That's sort of how I live my life, in tune with my cycle. But I just think that anything that is cycle informed for women is the way to go. Why wouldn't your microdosing practice also be informed by your cycle?
Yeah, makes sense. Very interesting. I've learned so much today. So, Leslie, let's end with a tip to encourage women who are in the arena fighting for the life that they want.
But there's so many things I could say. I just think, I think that if you're in the thick of it right now and you're really fighting, I just want to give you the confidence and the empowerment to know that like you have the power to move through this. You're going to be okay. And connect back with that breath. I think the breath is something we always have with us. We can take it anywhere, thank goddess. And just take a big, deep breath and let it out with some sound. I think breathing for me and grounding into that part of my body has been extremely helpful. And so that would be what I would leave them with.
Thank you so much. Oh, actually, how can we connect with you?
Sure. If you've listened to this the whole way and you think, wow, this woman is batshit crazy, or maybe she has some answers that I would really love to hear more about, I'd love to invite you to book a call with me. We can talk more about whether microdosing is right for you, whether somatic trauma recovery coaching could be right for you as well. But I just want you to know that there's hope, right? If you're going through the thick of it, like there's always hope. And so you can find me on Instagram at Leslie Draffin, send me a DM with the word hope, and I'll send you the link to book that no pressure call. My friend and client that I was speaking about who lost her dad, she booked it because, like I said, she was feeling so alone and she needed some additional support outside of therapy. And pretty quickly, she was able to set better boundaries, show up as a single mom even more powerfully for her kids, and really understand that like she's not alone in this world. So again, you can find me on Instagram at Leslie Draffin. You can check out my podcast, The Light Within, and send me a DM with the word hope, because again, there's always hope.
I love that podcast name. So thank you so much, Leslie. You've been a total badass and I've enjoyed hearing your story.
Thanks so much, babe.
And with that, we'll end our show. To all the badass women out there staying in the arena, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, own it and get after it.
Now that you've listened to this episode of Ordinary to Badass, we want to hear from you. Go to our website, ordinarytobadass.com/podcast. and submit your own experience on how you took your life from ordinary to badass and get the chance to be on a future Spotlight episode of the show. That's ordinarytobadass.com/podcast. While you're waiting for the next episode of the show, wipe off the sweat, dust off the dirt, and get back in the arena.